It is time for today's high-intensity tech training. Cybersecurity is our focus today, and today's presenters will uncover crucial cybersecurity trends, including cybersecurity for AI, GRC, automated threat detection, and securing remote work environments. We'll hear about the key factors shaping cybersecurity investments and provide actionable strategies to tackle today's pressing challenges. You'll leave here today knowing how to navigate this evolving landscape with confidence. Look at this lineup. I couldn't be happier to welcome back to the Telarus Tuesday call and HITT Training Telarus VP of Cybersecurity Jason Stein, along with solution engineer Trevor Burnside and solution architects Samera Riaz and Jason Kaufman. Hi, everybody. Glad to have you all here.
Hey, Doug, thank you. Great job, Kobe. Great information. So what I thought we'd do is a little bit of a fireside chat, a little different than what we've done in the past. We've definitely PowerPointed to death, given a lot of stats. What I wanted to do was really pick the brains of each of the engineers and architects that are focused on cyber and talk about what's resonating this year so far so that you could get an idea of what to position to your clients from now until the end of the year, and then how to position them. So, what's great about this incredible team is that on the weekends, they're bored because, first off, Jason Kaufman literally is the most certified man in the entire industry, and he just spends his weekends getting certified. Trevor decided to go, he was bored on the weekends with all the things that he has going on and decided to get his master's degree in cybersecurity. And I think Samera, not only serves on boards like Forbes, but she studies quantum computing, and they all have too much time on their weekends, which is pretty impressive. So, Samera, let's start with you. We were chatting, and I think this is your first HITT call, which is exciting to have you on. So, welcome to the team. I'm sure everyone's going to be very excited to start working with you. She is out of the Dallas market, and so you'll see Samera start to work on a lot of cybersecurity opportunities. With you. She's already heavily embedded in a bunch of opportunities. But Samera, one of the great things that I think you bring to the table is being a former CISO. You have a different perspective because you've actually been in the trenches and rolling up your sleeves. We were just talking about how we were reading some articles, and there's a bunch of things that have said that there's going to be a huge uptick in people purchasing cybersecurity in Q4 and heading into Q1 of next year. Why is that? And what do you think that people are going to be focused on? If you were a CISO right now in that role, what would you be focused on?
I would be focused on getting funding from my board, which with all the spend and all the hype around Q4 of 2025, there's different bills being passed that there's funding available for companies in certain industries to tap into that for security. So obviously from that trend and that all these articles that we've been seeing, companies are gonna start buying more security, especially around AI, how to contain shadow AI, getting a solution that's holistic, because if you can't see it, you can't secure it. So CISOs are always looking for solutions that can give them a single pane of glass where they can see their entire digital environment right in front of them to see what is most vulnerable, what needs to be patched, what could be the MITRE attack path into my environment today. So those are things that are within my peer groups. Those are the conversations we're having, is how do we prepare for what's coming next?
I love it. And, to your point, 80% of organizations are looking to outsource some of their cybersecurity this year. So it makes a lot of sense. And you're hearing it straight from a CISO. And we'll come back to, I have a couple of things I wanted to ask. Jason Kaufman, so obviously this is the year of AI. It feels like the last 2 years, a year of AI. Are we still getting a huge uptick in AI? What are customers asking you for advice for? What are people buying from Telarus most?
Yeah, a lot of it goes to exactly what Samara was saying, the visibility and knowing what users are using, what tools, what information are they putting in there. They want to know the inherent risks that non-malicious users are adding to the business by just trying to be more efficient with a lot of these AI tools. The architecture term of them that says, hey, you could boost your productivity 3 to 5x and all that stuff. Everybody wants to do that. Nobody wants to write a 300-word email anymore or a document. They want to have something do it on their behalf with just a couple sentences really quick. So everybody is interested in using it. So the demand is there. So the CISOs and CTOs that we're talking to, or a lot of them I'm talking to, are trying to figure out, how do I get in front of that And exactly what Samara was saying, the visibility and then the protecting of it, and also training the employees on how much risk they're adding to the business and what they should and should not do. So it leads to a lot of conversation on, hey, what is your AI strategy and roadmap? Do you need to follow the 42001 framework? How in depth do you need to get into with this stuff? And then what policies, procedures, and technical controls do you need to have in order to do this? But a lot of the times, it's just either a strategy conversation and picking out individual milestones and figuring out, hey, which controls are necessary for this individual component, or a lot of those quick go-to-market strategies where we just throw a gateway in front of it and give them the visibility and protections by some SaaS-based subscription tool that we have access to. So a lot of different ways that we can navigate the conversation, but it's the same thing of, hey, how do I get in front of this and how do I protect the business so I'm not being held liable?
One of the interesting things that you just touched on was the fact that historically, we've helped smaller organizations that maybe had 1 to 5 on their IT staff and they only had one person dabbling in security. But now you're saying, everybody on this call, I think, is saying that we're helping CISOs even more than ever. And, CISOs need help, right? It's not just an IT director anymore. These CISOs are actually relying on Telarus, the TSDs, for that guidance. Is that correct?
Yeah, because they're other C-level executives in those businesses are getting hounded to use AI. So it's like that catch-22 on they're getting hounded from the business to utilize AI to make themselves more efficient, get competitive advantage. But then the CISO is responsible on protecting the business from AI. So it's that never ending offense and defense of the business, just saying, hey, we need to use something, figure out how to use it, but figure out how to use it safely. And that's not even all of the malicious AI attacks that we're seeing as well as part of that other conversation. So yeah, it's just that revolving door on, hey, how do I stay in front of the business trying to implement AI and how do I protect it?
Yeah, there's a lot of gotchas with AI, which is interesting. So typically non-technical people are saying, hey, we need AI for a lot of different reasons. IT figure it out, and it's tough. So Trevor, we just went to RSA, a couple months ago, and there were 40,000 people there, 600 and something booths. Was AI anywhere around? Is AI going away? It's a fad, right? And then, what's the thing that stood out to you most while you were there?
Yeah. The funny thing was, driving around San Jose and San Francisco, like every billboard has AI. Like, you'd have to be blind to miss it, right? It's like just everywhere in your face, especially at RSA. Everybody's booth, all the vendors, it's all about how they're adding AI or protecting you from AI, right? That was the whole narrative. So some of that was a little bit of having to read between the lines and figure out, what's actually valuable, what's, proprietary, what's innovative, what's kind of jumping on the bandwagon with the Me Too. So it's a little bit of sifting through that and figuring out what's actually going to provide value to an organization, because that's obviously what we're trying to do, right? Is understand where suppliers position themselves and then what that means to the consumer and how they should be using it. So
I love that. So Samera, I see John asks a really good question, but we had this conversation a couple months ago. When you were in the CISO role, did you know that the TSD channel existed?
Yeah.
And if you knew now what you did back then, would you have leaned on this side of the channel to help you? Because think about, a lot of partners are sitting here saying, how do I, maybe not a technical person who maybe is newer to cybersecurity, still be of value to a CISO? Are you open to that kind of conversation as a CISO?
Definitely, yes. I wish when I joined the channel about 1.5 years ago, within 4 months after realizing what I'm really doing, I in my mind, I'm like, where have you guys been my whole life? I could have leveraged the TAs, the TSDs it would have made my life so much easier, because as a CISO and the seats you guys sit in now too, we're bombarded with great vendors wanting to showcase their products, which is great. But for a CISO, our whole practice is driving a security solutions, protecting our companies, protecting our employees. We don't have a whole lot of time to research on what solutions will be the best for us. There's just no time because you're firefighting every day. So the wealth of knowledge and the value that TAs and TSDs bring to CISOs is unmatched. Like if I wish I knew somebody like Kaufman, like Burnside, when Jason and Trevor, when I was a CISO. I mean, that would have I would have advanced in my career really quickly. I would have had world-class solutions in place for my company. We actually went through a ransomware event, and that wouldn't have happened if I had the right TAs and the right TSDs in place. So
I love that perspective, and we'll get into more about funding and how you position that. Trevor, let's talk about the user behaviors. Obviously, still 90-ish% of all breaches are caused by humans. There's a lot of bad actors going on. How do we utilize that? What are some of the products that you're positioning to help with that user challenge that any organization has? And then if you're talking to a supplier, what are the questions that you're asking clients, or they can ask clients to open up those doors in those conversations?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think from a user perspective, that, when you talk about security and that defense in depth, there's a lot of ways you tackle it, obviously from, IAM practices or identity management. Lately, what's been kind of rising, or what we've been talking about a lot, is zero trust, remote access, replacing VPN, because there's been a lot of compromises with VPNs lately. It's been an attack vector that has been kind of highlighted recently. So, transitioning from VPN to zero trust, where you're actually doing that continuous monitoring of the person, of not just their credentials, but how their behavior, things like that. And then also something that's been on the rise really around users, but it's about how the organization works, is the data labeling and data classification, as far as, hey, if I'm a user and I want to use AI within, generative AI in a business application, and potentially the organization is allowing for that, or maybe even creating like a co-pilot or a private instance to do that, how are we letting the users, with their policies and the access, maintaining, the normal policies through that generative AI, LLM, or large language model, so that the right people have the access to the right stuff, and they don't have, access to all HR data that maybe they shouldn't. So it is a layered approach, right? And it really depends on what the outcome that the business is trying to do, or the initiative that they're working on. But it's certainly been on the rise.
I love it. Jason Kaufman, so we've been focused a lot this year on product versus solution selling. How many times does a partner bring you just a product specific? And then how many times does it expand into more holistic cybersecurity? And then how do you pivot that? And so for the partners on this call, are you comfortable with them just getting a point solution and then bringing you in? How could they best benefit by asking a few more questions?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's probably part of every conversation that we have, to where somebody already has some form of solution that they've already invested in. So whether that's like CrowdStrike on the endpoint, Sentinel-1, or hey, we started dipping into Microsoft, but we don't know how to use it. But they're generally bringing something to the table where it's not a complete greenfield, opportunity. So the initial conversation is, hey, we want to renew our CrowdStrike licensing. How do we do that? So it's a conversation on, hey, we have multiple avenues from VARs that could just renew the licensing as it sits, get you Falcon Complete and use their MDR package. But, what are you doing for your firewalls? What are you doing for your cloud resources? What are you doing for other things? Like, what are other pieces of the business that CrowdStrike can't physically see? And how are you monitoring that? You're not getting all the correlation and threat vectors that are possible out there. And you're not getting all that visibility that you really need to secure the environment. You're only doing a piece of it. So it's half of a consult and half of trying to figure out, hey, what all else do they need to protect? And that's where their initial assessment of what they need is not going to be fully reliable to them. So a lot of the conversation is just digging in and figuring out what other resources are they using, where the users are accessing from, what are they accessing, and what is everything in between that we need to protect. So a lot of times it's just a misnomer on, hey, CrowdStrike or Sentinel-1 is going to do everything for us. So I think a lot of the conversations are just expanding on that.
Okay, so let's talk about GRC. Let's have each of you take one of the letters. Let's start, Jason Kaufman, with the G, governance. So what is governance? How does a partner position governance? Are we getting asked for it a lot? And I think I saw a stat still that 12% of organizations are even following an AI governance or framework. Why is governance important? And are we getting asked for it a decent amount?
We're not specifically getting asked for it. Like, so we don't get a request for, hey, I want to work on my cybersecurity governance. It is, but it works into the conversation because it's the ever changing and ever updating and monitoring all the different pieces of your cybersecurity maturity. So it's looking at the policies, procedures, the technical controls, but just continuously monitoring it to make sure that you're governing, you know, not to use the word in the definition, but you're governing everything continuously. And it's not just a one point in time check that you can just do it and then forget about it. So none of the opportunities actually come in for governance, but they need a tool that's going to continuously monitor them. So that's part of like vulnerability management. It's part of policy procedures updating. It's part of, you know, user awareness and training. It's part of everything that goes into frameworks and compliance. But it's just an idea more of, you know, a culture of cybersecurity maturity. So that's part of every conversation, but it's never really truly asked.
Love it. So, okay, so then let's get into the R. Samera, risk. First off, you reported to the board. Was risk important to the board? Is it being pushed down to the security team, to the IT decision makers? Then we can talk about funding. How do you get funding for that cybersecurity conversation? But when you think about risk, you know, were you trying to identify your risks and then put dollar amounts to the risks and then get the board to then fund those risks so that, you know, we prioritize what's most detrimental? How important was risk to you as a CISO?
Very much. So for CISOs, we walk a tightrope with budget and risk in our hands. So it's, you know, if you can picture that, that's kind of our world. And risk is definitely one of the top. Risk is what drives a company and limits a company, right? So getting funding for the risks that were prevalent. Luckily, one of my boards that I served on, they were tech savvy. They understood the risks. They were like, "Oh yeah, we should give our funding for that." Other boards, not so much. But either way, to your point, Jason, having a dollar amount associated with that risk seals a deal. For any board conversations that you are a part of today, if you have a dollar amount listed with whatever your risk is or your ask is, you will get funding for it. It's because it's a numbers game, unfortunately, at that level.
I love it. And, you know, 42% of organizations are looking to outsource their risk and put together a cybersecurity committee to help advise the board. So there's a lot of opportunity there that you probably heard me talk about. So Trevor, let's talk about the C. I want to talk about two aspects of compliance. First off, do we feel like compliance kind of took a back seat during, you know, COVID? Maybe we didn't see compliance as prevalent. Maybe there weren't fines. And is it coming back? Is there more compliance in place? And then let's talk about CMMC. Why is it important? Why should customers be focused on it? Who needs CMMC? You know, what are some of the suppliers that they can leverage, and how do they position that conversation?
Yeah, I think to your point, there was kind of this relaxed feeling towards some compliance, you know, depending on the framework during COVID and coming out of it. We know that this year, and you know, from a HIPAA perspective, the policies have become more stringent. Actually, the controls and policy or penalties have gone up per infraction as well. And we are hearing that, hey, they're going to start cracking down for per infraction. So you look at, you know, potentially how many infractions have you had? Is the cost of mitigation less than the infraction or the penalties? Then the apps, you know, the answer is usually certainly. So there's budget there to start shoring up some of that compliance. When it comes to, I think from a you know, a trusted advisor perspective, the better we know compliance or what our customers are regulated by, the better we can speak to them about the things that they are purchasing or what they're thinking of, because any regulated industry is governed by their compliance framework, and that's what they're working within at a very minimum, at least. And so understanding the compliance that they're governed by is going to help us from a sales cycle, but also understand their mentality and where they need to allocate their budget on that regard. As far as CMMC goes, so that's the cybersecurity maturity model certification. It's from the government, really based on, you know, we're going to get, you know, into the weeds, but NIST 800-171, the security framework from a controls perspective. CMMC though is, unique to the government and working with federal DoD. Anyone, you can think of it as like a third party vendor risk management strategy by the government of, hey, if you want to work with the government, you have to meet a certain baseline of cybersecurity. And that is, unfortunately, NIST 800-171, which is 110 security controls that you'd have to implement. So for small business that, working with government contractors, that can be a heavy burden. And luckily, we do have vendors that can help with that, from a consultation, gap assessments, all the way up to attestation with the C3PAO, which is required to get CMMC level 2. So there's a whole conversation that we can have about that. It's very relevant right now. We are seeing government contracts from primes and subs requiring CMMC compliance currently or by the end of the year. So we have CMMC discussions quite frequently right now.
Hey, Jason, quick, do you mind me adding on that? One thing I've found highly successful in the CMMC conversations, and great stuff, Trevor, that's spot on, is the question of, hey, how much of your contracts you lose out on if you don't get CMMC compliant? Because it's not like, on the other frameworks and compliances that customers are requiring to get the business. Now they're being threatened to lose out on business that they already had. So I had a 25 user company that had a $23 million government contract that they were going to lose out on if they didn't get CMMC compliant within a certain time frame. So multiple avenues depending on what that time frame is, less than 90 days, all the way up to 18 months is kind of like the typical C3PAO scheduling. So I just wanted to add in that tidbit, ask that question. Anything CMMC is, how much would you lose out on if you don't get this compliance? Because that's immediate ROI that we can recognize.
I love all those. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to give you guys topics and have each of you tackle one. If you were a partner, and you can't choose the same one, so sorry, we'll let Trevor go first. All right, so if you were a partner today, what would you focus on for Q3 and Q4 when you're talking to your customers? What's an easy, simple one? Are we talking email security? Are we talking passwordless identity and access management? Are we talking help desk support? Are we talking physical security or endpoint detection response, MDR? What would you focus on? Pick one. And then what is it? How do you position it to a customer in a simple form?
I think when you look at risk management as a practice, right, of like, let's identify our biggest assets to the organization, as well as our, some of our biggest, threat areas. Email and endpoint is always going to be one of the biggest threat areas for any organization, especially ones that are like, oh, we're all in the cloud. We don't have any physical infrastructure. We don't have firewalls. We're all, in the cloud. We're secure. Well, everyone's got workstations and we're all working remotely and we all have email. And these are, if you look at how many breaches occur from email compromise or, phishing attempts, things like that, there's no reason not to start with there and make sure that clients are addressing email security and that they're happy with it and it's working for them. So, just because you have something in place, are you actually looking and seeing, doing phishing tests? Are you looking to see what the trend is? Are your people getting better? Are they staying the same? If they're staying the same, you got to put in a practice to start increasing their awareness and ability to recognize some of these threats in their emails. So that's really relevant to everybody and where I'd start.
It's super easy too. Hey, thank you so much for trusting us with your voice and your data, your CX. A lot of customers also relied on us for their email security because it's still the #1 attack vector. 95% of all breaches are still caused by humans, all that. Oh, great. Samera, all right, you don't get to use email security. What would you do as a partner? What's the #1 conversation you would have with security and IT decision makers? That's easy. How would you do it?
Sure. So I know that we're almost into Q3, starting Q4. Most companies are doing their P&Ls now, budgeting for 2026. Now is the time I'd start having conversations with CISO on a holistic view of their security posture. So what I would do is I would ask a CISO or a security director in a company, hey, do you want an assessment of your MSSP and how well they're doing today? Most 100% of the time, your CISO is going to say, oh, they're crappy. I wish I had somebody else. Nobody's ever happy with the MSSP they have. it's a perfect in, right? So at that point, then you would say, well, great, we have resources that can help you go like for like and make sure you get the biggest bang for your buck. Make sure all your endpoints are captured, your IoT devices, anything that's connecting on your network. Oh, and by the way, we can also do a network assessment for you to make sure it's segmented properly. So you can, there's so many ways to go with security. I always like to say security is like a diamond. It has so many facets to it, but it's the one thing, right? And it's beautiful. And so if you approach your CISOs and just ask, hey, what solutions do you have in place today? And how can we optimize to make sure you get more for your money with all these great providers? I think that's a win-win conversation.
See, Trevor and Jason, you guys never mentioned diamonds. We needed Samera on the team to be able to and weave diamonds into a cybersecurity conversation. Okay, so I agree. So assessments can be, just a security assessment. It could be a gap assessment, where are your gaps, a vulnerability assessment, penetration testing. All of those are great ins. And a lot of times somebody may say, oh, I already have somebody, but they need to rotate through. All right, Kaufman, you're sitting there talking to a partner, and you want to advise them as to what they should be talking to their customer about. What's the number one thing that you get asked for the most? What's the simplest thing that you would position from now until the end of the year?
The people, so the customers and the users. So really, when you're looking at the defense in depth or the zero trust strategies, the most exterior perimeter is that layer 8, the actual user themselves, and protecting the user from themselves and also protecting the user from external threat actors. Establishing the policies, the accountability, and all that stuff. So you're looking at the administration controls, but we're getting a lot of requests for insider threat management and how to effectively do that. So a lot of it is telemetry that's already there from the MSSPs that are within the umbrella, but there are dedicated solutions now that people are asking for. And it's just that, going back to the governance of identity, making sure that people only have access to the things that they need to, that least privilege principle, and continuously monitoring for conditional access policies. Are they accessing it where they normally do, how they normally do? But then also, should they have this level of access continually to make sure that they have the resources that they need to do their job and nothing else? So it's establishing all those principles on that identity of that user and make sure that they are who they say they are. That's probably the biggest one. And then also training those users. If somebody came to me and said, hey, I have minimal cybersecurity budget, but I want to protect the business as much as possible, I start talking about user awareness training as the first dip in the toe, because you're first dip in the sand, dip in the water. I said dip in the toe. That doesn't make sense. But taking that methodology and saying, hey, the cheapest thing I could do is $2 to $3, sometimes $5 per user, depending on which application you use. But training those users, how can they decrease risk within the company, and then auditing them continuously with phishing simulations, vishing, smishing, all those different ishings, and make sure validating that they're watching this stuff and that they're not falling for it. That's probably one of the biggest threat mitigation techniques that I've seen used previously, and it's a big dip in the toe that somebody could use to up their cybersecurity game.
Love it. Not confusing at all. Okay, so let's talk about. I'm going to do the last question. Let's start with Samera, and then we'll go around. First off, we have two schools of thought with security decision makers. First one is, do they do it themselves? Do they do an internal SOC? Are they worried about their people leaving? Are they worried about, a threat getting through that they have no idea on? And then versus outsourcing. Obviously, 80% are outsourcing more. Some have already outsourced to an MSP. So one, are we seeing people getting more comfortable outsourcing? And two, what if they already have somebody like an MSP? How do you have that conversation? We'll start with Samera, and we'll go around Kaufman and then Trevor.
Sure. I think outsourcing is the best way to go for having been a CISO and a CIO, having managed internal teams. You're limited, right? You're limited to what your people know. And there's so much out there that they don't know, and they frankly don't have time to research it. So having a good MSSP aligned with you, where you can leverage that bench, have an extension of your team so that they can bring in all the expertise from global threats right into your SOC. That's just a brilliant model to go. Plus, it's OpEx costs instead of human costs, license costs. So it's also easier on the budget. And CFO smiles on OpEx instead of hitting your profit margin. So it's a good, that's a good conversation to have. As far as seeing the uptick in outsourcing, yes, more companies are outsourcing now. I think we're getting away from the good, I want to be in control of the security, because now CISOs are actually, they can go to jail, they go before the SEC hearing. Companies can go after them individually. They have to have personal liability insurance now, along with cybersecurity insurance for the company. There's so many gotchas now for CISOs that outsourcing that is this just a smart thing to do.
I love that. So one, the liability is scary too. If you hire people, all you're getting is tech. You're not getting software. You're getting a body. You still need to go buy it. But if you go to an MSSP, which would be a supplier in our portfolio, you're getting technology, licensing services, and a whole team of experts. Doug, I see you on, so that means we're running out of time. What kind of questions do you have for us before we hand it over?
We are getting close to the end here, but great presentation from all of you. I did want to highlight Angela Hefner's comment. She works in Telarus Supplier Management Group, does a fantastic job, and just mentions that, yearly pen tests have become a thing for a lot of companies now. And as we get closer to the end of the year, those calendars fill up and they're harder to do. As you've emphasized what a great resource that can be for starting this conversation, maybe time to get those on the books now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you definitely need to be looking at doing those. Either we have a lot of companies who ended their fiscal year in June and are moving into July with new budgets, and we have a lot of people that are going to wind down their year, but a lot of them are quarterly, some of them are biannually. Usually the second half of the year, they got to set up a new assessment, new pen test, something along those lines.
Phenomenal presentation. We are out of time, but we'll keep the chat window open. If you have additional questions for any of our panelists, feel free to put those in the window and they'll be around here for a few more minutes and can answer those for you. Thanks, Jason Stein, Trevor Birdside, Samera Riaz, and Jason Kaufman, dipping in the toe. That we're going to have to work that into next week's presentation somehow. Thanks, guys. Excellent presentation.